Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I want to start a new project on GasWorks. Kit bashing a GasWorks for the module and for any model railroad in North America and the UK and even in Western Europe, because these things were just everywhere, all over the industrialized world anyway. It seems like they've been relatively forgotten and ignored with respect to model railroading, because I personally have never seen a model railroad in any magazine article or in person that included a model of a GasWorks on their layout. Now, I have seen a couple from the UK, because I think they lasted a bit longer, the GasWorks did, in the UK into the 1970s. And so there's a little bit more of a memory among those in the UK than those here in the US. So first I want to go back and tell you a little bit about GasWorks, why they make great models for model railroads, and then we'll start on kit bashing a GasWorks for your model railroad. Okay, so I want to start with a little bit of a history lesson about what a GasWorks was. And basically, these are something that came into use at the very end of the 1790s. There was some experimentation being done with a process where you heat coal to about 1100 degrees centigrade inside of a closed oven. And when you do that, it tends to burn off or volatilize all of the gases and other easily volatilized compounds in coal, and that can be collected and used because it produces gases such as hydrogen gas and methane and related gases, which can be used as fuels. It produces a lot of other nasty stuff. It generates a lot of tar, and also ammonia. Hydrogen cyanide is created, which is deadly, and it also produces a lot of hydrogen sulfide, which creates a nice rotten egg smell that people don't like to smell. So these things were usually located on the outskirts of a town somewhere, and are obviously downwind from any population centers. As far as general use goes, the earliest dates that I've seen for any commercial work was in the early 1800s, about 1805 in England, they started building some of these commercial GasWorks. And initially they were used to produce the gases for lighting, particularly street lights in towns and cities. And I think probably one of the first commercial ones was for London. And throughout much of the 1800s, that's what the gas was used for, was for lighting homes and for lighting streets. But then towards the end of the century, as electrical lighting became readily available in many of these areas, people started using electric lights instead of gas. And so the demand for gas dropped. And at that point, the gas companies started promoting their product for use for heating and for cooking. And that use lasted, up into the 1950s here in the United States. And in the UK, it lasted up until about 1970 when the North Sea gas fields started producing large amounts of gas that was connected into the national network. And that rapidly spelled the demise of GasWorks in the UK. So look up the term GasWorks using Google or any other search engine on your computer, and then add in the name of the town that you live in, or a town on the model railroad that you model. And I guarantee you're going to come up with probably a website that will give you some information and details on the GasWorks in that community. I did it for here in Asheville, and sure enough, up popped the Asheville GasWorks with information on the history of it here in Asheville, North Carolina. And these things were in just about every small city and town and large cities all over the United States, probably in Canada, and I know in the UK and in Western Europe. The neat thing about these structures is they had some very beautiful industrial architecture. You know, it was Victorian era, and so they had this brickwork that was quite commonly very fancy, and had all sorts of fancy details around the windows and the doors and the up around the rafters and the like. So they were very interesting structures, and some of them have actually been renovated and used for apartments and for businesses and things of that nature. So they're still around, and if you look it up, you might even be able to find one near you that you can take a look at. Now, the great thing about that is it makes it easy to model them, because there are a lot of kits that date back to that type of architecture readily available. And I'll show you one here in a minute that I'm going to be using. So what did a gasworks consist of? Okay. First of all, you would have a railroad track coming into it, because they burned a lot of coal, or they converted a lot of coal to gas anyway. So that's one of the good things about them from the standpoint of modeling, is because they make a great industry for coal on your model railroad all the way up until the late 1950s in the United States, and in the UK through the 1960s. They were still quite active. So then they also would require certain other products. They used lime in order to remove some of the contaminants. Early on, they used lime to remove the sulfur. Later on, they used iron oxide in strippers or scrubbers and the like, filters, to remove the sulfide gases. You had hydrogen sulfide and carbon disulfide, and if you pass the gas over iron oxide, then it would combine, and you could recover that sulfur. And then they could sell that sulfur off, or that sulfide off, for making sulfuric acid. And the same thing, when the coal was gasified, turned into a gas by heating it in these ovens to 1100 degrees centigrade, and these were called retorts. And the structure that they were located in was called the retort building, or the retort house, things of that nature. So you would have coal that was taken into those buildings and used in the retorts to produce the gas. They used coke or coal to heat those ovens up to the required 1100 degrees. And they had to keep this going for about 8 hours, because it took about 8 hours for the process to go to completion. And during that time, they were producing all of these fumes, and they would run the gas through first a set of condensers, and these could be run through water or through air, and that would cause the tar and the ammonia, a large part of it, to condense into a liquid or a tar solid, and then that would be dropped down into a storage pit. And then later on, that pit could be pumped out and pumped into a tank car and sold to companies that were distillers of tar, and they would make creosote and various other things with it. And the same thing goes for the ammonia. The ammonia, it would be dissolved in the water fraction, and it would go down into these storage tanks, and later on that could be pumped out separately into tank cars and sold to companies that wanted to make fertilizer and other things with it, because you got other compounds, organic compounds, that would be stripped out at the same time. So there were a number of different processes involved that can be modeled and that provide the opportunity for a loads in, loads out type of operation. In some cases, empties in and loads out. So you can ship coke, because one of the byproducts of the process was coke, and the material that was left over after the coal was turned into a gas was coke. So after the end of the burn, after 8 hours or so, they would open up the retort doors, and then they would pull out the ashes, or the leftover of the coke, really, and dump some water on it to put the flames out and lay it out to dry. And then that could be sold off locally for people who used it for heating and for cooking. And it could be put in open cars and shipped out to companies that sold coke throughout the country for other purposes or in other communities. And the same thing goes for the ammonia, as I said, and all the other dangerous chemicals that came along with it. And also, one thing, it's very helpful to get some pictures of these various facilities. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you any of those, even though there are, just tons of them available on websites on the internet. Just about all of them that I found were copyright protected. And YouTube takes a dim view of people showing videos and using copyrighted material. So I can't use any of that to show it to you. But if you just go on Google and do or open your browser and do a search for GasWorks, you will just get images of all kinds of these all over the US, all over England, all over Germany and Western Europe, Australia, and the like. There are websites that I have viewed that have these. And I will put a couple of the ones that I really like and am basing my modeling on in the description. So you can go to the description for this video, and there will be a website link there for you to copy and use. And then you can take a look at those and get an idea of the layout of these GasWorks and the different types of scrubbers and filters and condensers that were used. Now, another very important component of GasWorks were what were called the gasometers or the gas holders. And these were basically a big pot that was turned upside down, and it floated on a pool of water. So the gas, after it was produced and cleaned up, could be pumped up into this inverted pot, basically. And because it was sitting on water, it would tend to float up. And as it floated up, it would pressurize the gas. And that pressure provided the pressure for the distribution lines throughout the community. Now, that was the early system. Later on, in later years, they developed other types of gas holders that did not require the same pool of water in order to float the gas holder tank itself. And both of those types are available as kits, and in some cases as already made models. And I'll show you one here. This is one that Hornby sold for a while. I don't think it's in production right now, but I found this one on eBay, and it's in pretty good shape. And you can see here, this is I think it was an iron structure that formed the pool, and then this was the inverted pan, basically, that sat on top of it and floated. And then it went up and down as the gas was produced, and then it went up as the gas was produced, and then it would go down as the gas was being used in the community. And the tank itself was kept, in proper orientation by these various poles here, and it had rollers set on top of the tank that set into tracks. And that way it would rise up and down perfectly horizontally. So these were used, up until maybe 1850s, something like that. I think it's when they started coming in with the newer kinds. But, on a lot of the small town-type gasworks, they continued to use a lot of the early types of facilities long after the larger cities started implementing the more efficient measures. Now, as I said, it's easy to model these, but I have very rarely seen these modeled anywhere, and particularly in the United States. Now, I know that Walthers for a while did offer a GasWorks kit, and the fact that it's not in production any longer might point to the unpopularity and the lack of awareness by model railroaders of these as a great industry for your model railroad. And in that case, they used a kit called Northern Power and Light originally, and so they used that as the retort building, and then they had one of the more modern gas holders along with it, and some vertical tanks that were used for the condensers and strippers and filters and that kind of stuff. But like I said, that's no longer available, but you will see photographs of that if you do a search for GasWorks, and it will give you some ideas of how you can kit bash one, because the individual gas holder and Northern Power and Light and the vertical tanks, they're all readily available through Walthers anyway. So you can go ahead and kit bash one. So that gives you an idea of some of the history of gasworks in the time period. I mean, they were around for 200 years almost. So they cover a lot of different eras. You know, it's easy to model them, really, if you get in and do a little bit of research as to what goes into a gasworks location. And let me tell you, because nobody knows very much about them, there's very few people that are going to point and say that's wrong, okay? So you can do whatever you want and come up with something that looks fairly close to the actual prototype, and I doubt you're going to have very many people that are going to criticize your modeling efforts. And you're going to have an unusual model on your layout and one that offers some real good operating capabilities. So what I want to do now is bring the camera in here, and I'm going to focus in here on the module to the area where I am starting to put together and kit bash some kits that I think will make a fairly good representation of a gasworks in a small town in England or the United States. So let me go ahead and move the camera in here and we'll take a closer look. Okay, so this is the area that I am developing for my gasworks. And what I want to show you first is the kit that I'm using as the basis for this. And it's an older Concor kit. It's been around for a number of years. I think it's probably still available. And it's called the Cambria Ironworks. And the thing I like about this, I mean, it's dates from the late 1800s in Cambria, Pennsylvania. There was an ironworks there, and that facility is what this is based on. And you can see it's got multiple buildings. So it looks like a facility that was built up over the years, because you've got the one main big brick building there in the back, and then you have a smaller building that kind of wraps around it, and then you've got an even smaller one out front. So you've got several roof lines. There's all kinds of devices that are provided to go on, and appliances to go on the roof and on the side of the buildings. So it has a lot of very nice details to be used for kit bashing. And along with that, I have another Concor kit in the same series, and this is the Cambria City Boiler Works. So it provides another building that can be used, and also various other parts that can be cannibalized and used as part of a kit bash. So let's take a look at what I'm doing here, because I'm just getting started. Basically then, I'm going to be using the basic Cambria City Ironworks building as the retort house and the coal storage house in there, as well as some of the other facilities that were associated with these, because they had pumps to pump the gas out to the gas holder, and they also had to pump it through the various scrubbers and filters and condensers, and there would be a tar storage tank located somewhere out here on the property, and then of course I've got my gas holder here. So these are various components that I'm starting to just put together. And in this case, let me point out that I've used, so this is the basic Cambria City Ironworks. This building here is part of the boiler house complex. These two vertical kits, tanks here, I think these are left over from an interstate fuel company kit that I put together once upon a time, and I did not need all of the vertical tanks that were included with it. But Walthers sells sets of vertical tanks and horizontal tanks, so you can buy these. Also, somewhere around here that I'm going to use, I have containing various pieces of pipework that Walthers sells. I think that goes with their natural gas kit, or is separate from it. But at any rate, Walthers catalog just has a lot of these various kits that go along with various buildings that they've pulled out, and they sell them separately, and that you can get. And so you can probably find this Concor kit in the Walthers catalog too. I haven't checked to make sure it's still available. But the important thing is, it's got, if you look close at this, it has a lot of this fancy brickwork that I was talking about. So we've got these brick arches, we've got this fancy brickwork here. There's this crenulated brickwork here up under the eaves and the like. So there's a lot of nice little details that hints of a Victorian origin for this stuff. And that's also very true for the main building itself. And I'm going to be doing a lot more cutting. I've started putting this together, and I'll go over that later as to why I do that, because there are some things that I do. I usually build the basic building first, and then do my basic painting, and follow that up with more detailed work afterwards, and adding windows and doors and the like. And I have specific reasons why I do that, and I'll explain that to you in the next video in this series. Also, this particular chimney comes with the kit and is supposed to go there. This one here is part of the city boiler. It's supposed to go, I think, right there. But I decided that I wanted it over here. So I'm going to use it as part of the retort complex. So we actually have two chimneys on the retort, and this will just be one of the buildings that are used for storage or for other operations here in the gasworks. And then back over here we have the track that goes into the rear of the gasworks, and then coal would be unloaded from the rear directly into the building and would have storage areas there, and there might be some storage right here alongside the track as well. But I really don't have room for a lot of that. So I'm going to make the assumption that they had a storage room. Maybe this side of the building here was for coal storage, and or maybe half of the main building was for coal storage, and the retorts themselves were located down at this end. So they had it broken up that way. And then the gas was pumped out and run through the various filters and scrubbers here, and then ran in pipes that will run behind or under or around the building and go to the gas holder itself. So that's what I'm looking at right now. And in the next portion, or the next video on this, I'll go ahead and explain, the modeling that I'm initially doing, and why I go about doing this the way I do, because I know a lot of people might prefer to paint and the various components of the building first and install the windows and doors before they glue it together. I go about it backwards, and I'll tell you why later. There's a reason I do that for my madness. So take a look at the websites, get a feeling for what gasworks are, and hopefully by next time you'll be ready to see how I go about putting these various kits together, kit bashing them to come up with what I feel is going to be a good representation of a small town gasworks. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. In the next video, I'll be showing you how I went ahead and started kit bashing the Concor Cambria Ironworks kits into a gasworks, and we'll go on from there. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guide. Bye now.